I want to introduce you to two ways of playing the game. First is the performance zone, also known as flow, and the second one is the improvement zone. Flow is a state of mind where you're hyper-focused, but without actually putting any active effort into it. You are not thinking about what you're doing, it's all done on a subconscious level. Flow is not autopilot though. Autopilot is a complete disconnect to what actually happens, while flow is the opposite. You're actually present in the moment, you're actively making decisions, it's just that you are not aware of them. It's similar to autopilot in the sense that while you're autopiloting you are not aware of what you're doing, and the same is true for flow, but if you're autopiloting you are likely not making any decision whatsoever, you are just playing, you do not have any structure to your play or anything like that. On the other hand, while you are flowing you actually had a structure behind it, it's just that you are not thinking about it every other second. It all happens naturally. This brings me to the 4 stages of competence. Basically, when you are autopiloting, you are unconsciously incompetent. You do not know what you're supposed to do. You likely haven't encountered many situations that you're facing, likely due to low playtime or lack of experience. I know that this will sound a little bit weird, and maybe a bit exaggerated to some, but this is where most of the player base is at. Most players are unconsciously incompetent. Of course though, that doesn't mean that they cannot become unconsciously competent, which is the ultimate goal, that's flow basically. But their starting level is unconsciously incompetent. Your goal should be to achieve flow, to become unconsciously competent. But here's the thing. If you do not go through the other 2 stages, which are consciously incompetent and consciously competent, there is no way you become unconsciously competent. It's just not how it works. You need to know the theory behind what makes someone good. You need to have the ability to know what's a good decision, what's a bad decision, what makes up a good decision. The list goes on, but you get the point. You need to go through the process of learning before you can achieve flow. I'm pretty sure that many of you, however, had this moment of brilliance where you drop 30 kills, maybe even 40 kills, and you're like, what happened? That's when you likely entered flow for a brief moment. But it was likely only for a brief moment, and you also need to realize that even if you were flowing, it's likely that if a pro played against you, you would still get destroyed. You need to understand that flow is also relative to your skill level. If a pro is in flow, well, there's nothing stopping him. But if someone in gold, for example, is on flow, maybe he could beat platinum players, maybe even some diamond players, but he would still get destroyed by the average play of an immortal, for example. The idea was that you were unconsciously competent, but only relative to the skill level of that game. Let's see how we enter the performance zone. How do we achieve flow? The following concept is from the book The Inner Game of Tennis, which helped me a lot in research about flow and mentality in general. I highly recommend it if you want an even more in-depth explanation of flow. The first thing you need to do is view yourself as 2 selves actually. Your conscious self, known as self 1, and the subconscious self, known as self 2. Or our body. When they work together, both self 1 and self 2, that's when you enter flow. That's when you are unconsciously competent. However, most of the time, self 1 is sabotaging self 2. Because self 1 doesn't like it when things don't go well instantly, and the default mechanism is that it blames self 2. We might miss a shot or make a huge misplay, it doesn't matter. Since there is a lack of harmony, we are not able to perform at our best because our 2 selves are not cooperating with each other. And if there is a conflict between self 1 and self 2, we cannot enter flow. I'm going to share with you a little story that is also from the same book. There was this woman that played tennis. However, she had a very unique and special talent. She was always hitting the ball on the frame instead of the strings, 9 out of 10 times. The tennis coach was baffled at what was happening, because it is actually harder to hit the ball on the frame rather than the strings. The coach asked her about what were her thoughts while playing the game. She was overthinking a lot of aspects, but the most important one was that she was specifically stressed about not hitting the ball with the strings. So the coach told her to let go of that, to try and play freely, and surprisingly the woman started hitting the ball on the strings. However, she started making the huge mistake of being conscious that she was actually hitting the ball properly, and then she started hitting the frame again. What this little story tells us is that we need to stop being critical about ourselves if we want to perform. Do not overthink and do not despair if things go wrong. Even if we do well, even if we are playing our A game, we still need to keep a clear mind and do not overhype ourselves. We are self 1 and we need to let self 2 do his job. We need to be confident in his abilities to perform. So now we understand what are the requirements to enter flow. You need to be competent and you need to have a clear mind. But there are still a few factors that we need to take into consideration so we can enter flow more easily. Since flow is a state of absolute focus, you first need to condition your brain so you'll have an easier time both maintaining the flow and achieving it. Here are a few things you can do to improve your brain's functions and ready yourself. Exercise. If you want to access flow, this is crucial. Any exercise will do really. Exercise is known to help clear the mind and you're also going to be a lot healthier. Healthy body, healthy mind is what they say. Talking of a healthy body, you need better nutrition. I am not a nutritionist, so I'm not qualified to tell you exactly what to eat, especially since everybody has a different metabolism and such. But as far as I know, anything that contains omega-3 acids are generally okay to consume, which can be found in fish generally. I personally have capsules for when I have exams, for example, but if you want to take capsules, please consult your doctor or nutritionist. Fish will suffice for most of you, and they also contain protein, which is great. Another thing that helps a lot is meditation. I'll link down an article that talks about it in detail, but I'll paraphrase some bits of it that you might be most interested in. A study done at Harvard University showed that after 8 weeks, mindfulness meditation was found to increase cortical thickness in the hippocampus, which governs learning and memory. There was also a decrease in brain cell volume in the amygdala, which is responsible for fear, anxiety and stress. In other words, less tilt, so meditation brings in more benefits than you'd expect. Sleep. I'm always reiterating how important sleep is. Sleep is like a secret weapon that many fail to use. Sleeping 8 hours a night, keyword night by the way, will improve all your cognitive functions, which means target acquisition, reaction time, you will have a lot more energy throughout the day, the list goes on. If you decide to take any of the steps I've mentioned so far, make sure that sleep is one of them. Another quick trick you can use before playing is that you use a high power pose. So staying expanded, having your hands on your hips, hands behind back, chin up and so on. After just a few minutes of doing this, you will experience an increase in testosterone, which helps your confidence. You will also experience a decrease in cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone, so that means that less cortisol, less tilt. Awesome. Compare that to having a low power pose. Hands inwards, tense shoulders, a very inward body of some sort. You will experience the opposite effects. Higher cortisol and lower testosterone. So that's something to keep in mind. The more of the previous points you feel, the easier it will be to enter flow. However, there is one aspect you don't have full control over. According to the Hungarian professor, whose names I'm not gonna try to read because I'm gonna trigger every Hungarian person out there, you need a balanced challenge. If an activity doesn't challenge you, it's gonna be a lot harder to enter flow. You will likely get bored since you are likely winning either way. However, if the game is too hard, maybe you are playing versus Smurf, or maybe the enemy has a good day, again you will not be able to enter flow because you experience the complete opposite. It's not a challenge, it's a slaughter. So you need to be challenged in a balanced manner, where you need to put in effort in close games. Lastly, you need to have a set goal. The most obvious one is winning the game, and since this is a performance zone, it makes perfect sense. I've also made a video about goals. If you're interested in that, just click the card in the top right of the video and you'll be there in no time. Up until now we've talked about the performance zone. However, I want to bring you back to the 4 stages of competence. You cannot enter flow unless you are competent. The way we get competent is by going through the improvement zone. Every game you play needs to have a goal. You cannot just play randomly and think that you're gonna improve. That's not how it works. If you're gonna just play, you're likely going to autopilot instead. But here's the thing, if you're autopiloting, that means that you are in the unconscious incompetent zone. I'm pretty sure you don't want to be there. Otherwise, why would you watch this video? The way to improve needs to have 2 key factors. The first one being having a goal. You need to know what you want to learn before you're actually doing anything. If you want to learn movement, for example, make that the target for the next 10 games you're playing. Make it maybe an entire week focus. Just focus on that. I don't want to go in detail since I've already talked about this. You can just go watch that video instead. So I'm gonna go to the other factor. Your gameplay needs to be critiqued either by a coach, by a friend, or by yourself. It doesn't really matter, you just need an outside perspective. While you are playing, you have a subjective view of the game. If you are going to do the review yourself, you will still have a subjective view because after all, it's you who's playing. You're gonna view yourself as superior compared to what a coach would tell you, what a friend would tell you even. That friend or coach doesn't even need to be better than you. They just need to show you an outside perspective, like, look, here you picked wrong, you shouldn't have done that. Look, you could have used your ability better here or here. You just need another pair of eyes to spot things that you cannot see for yourself. If you don't have a second pair of eyes, there could be one mistake that you're making all the time, but you are just not aware of it. That's why a second opinion is really important. However, I do not recommend getting a coach unless you are like already really high elo, like over diamond or something like that. Because most of the mistakes you're making right now, if you are not diamond, are really obvious, like even your subjective self can tell that they are mistakes. The only thing a coach would do at that point would be to accelerate your improvement process. However, a coach's main job would be to like break mental blocks, or break some habits that you have and you cannot get rid of. If that's the case, sure, go ahead, get a coach. But if that's not the case, I highly suggest that you learn how to VOD review yourself and stick to that until you're high elo, and only then get a coach. As you can see, both the improvement zone and the performance zone cannot occur at the same time. For the simple fact that if you want to improve, you need to critique yourself. But if you want to improve, if you critique yourself, you cannot enter flow, because critiquing yourself doesn't allow for flow. My personal recommendation for you, do not try to enter flow just because it will give you a few free games. First off, it's very unlikely that you will enter flow properly and you might fall into autopilot, which you don't want. And at the same time, flow is a very natural process. Forcing it doesn't really work. Sure, if you do the things I've mentioned earlier, it will be easier to enter it, but it's still something that happens seemingly random. It's mainly when you are very focused and you really want to win a game. But if your goal is to get better at the game, to improve, then winning a game or two doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What you should be interested in should be things that you can learn every game. See how players react in certain situations. You might see a new way of using utility, anything can happen. And if you try to improve, that should be the things that you're looking for. Things that will help you improve over time on the average. Peaks will happen rarely and they do not define you as a player. Your average play, however, does define you. Thank you for watching, have a wonderful day.